Good day. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this conference. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there in person. I hope that this presentation clearly explains the research study carried out last year and that it provides insights into language teaching at university level here in Chile, and I hope that it also serves as a critique of standardization. I think that that's the main purpose of the study, because education cannot be standardized. It can be standardized in certain respects with certain quality standards, but these quality standards will obviously change depending on the context and the purpose of the study of English teaching pedagogy. So firstly, I want to explain that the issue emerged at the university. It was carried out in Santo Tomás University in Santiago. The main problem was that the English courses are the same for all the students at the university. They have different levels, from elementary, intermediate, and upper intermediate and advanced, which doesn't sound really bad from a wide perspective, but considering that each program has their own needs for the use of English, because they're tied to the graduate profiles of each program, that presented a problem. The heads of the programs detected that students weren't motivated to learn English, and that they didn't learn as much English as they hoped they would, considering they had at least from 2 to 6 semesters of English at the university. So the research study was guided by a social-critical paradigm, or a critical transformatory participatory paradigm. The idea behind the study was to create, to implement and to evaluate a needs-relevant English course for different programs at the university. The English courses were created considering 3 things. One thing was the action research design proposed by Burns, which considers plan, act, observe, and reflect, and it considers 2 cycles. So basically, plan, act, observe, reflect, revise plan, act, observe, and reflect. It also considered constructive alignment by Biggs and Tang, which is basically, to put it in simple words, the alignment between the course objectives, methodology, and evaluation, which is a methodology proposed for students at university. And it also considered an ESP framework put forward by Dudley, Evans, and St. John. This is a bit more complex, so I need to read my notes. This includes learners' professional information, learners' personal information, learners' language information about the target situation, which is called present language situation, learners' lacks or difference between present and target situation, learners' needs from course, language learning needs, communication information in the target situation or expectations from the course, and environmental information or teaching resources available. So having these 2 main constructs, the idea was to first detect those aspects, and it was done from 3 different perspectives, because the idea was not to just I create a course in my head and I put it into the students' classrooms, but it was the idea was to provide a participatory action research. So I had interviews with the directors of programs. At the beginning, the idea was to work with with veterinary medicine, public relations, social work, and commercial engineering. Those were the 4 programs that decided to participate in the project. So I had meetings with the directors of those programs, and I asked them questions in these 8 criteria that I mentioned, trying to detect the present language situation, like what students know, the target language situation, how students were supposed to use English in their professional contexts, the motivations for studying English, a kind of profile of the language used, and the resources available to carry out the classes. So the same information was asked to the students as well, like the previous language situations, what they expected from the course, of course with different questions. It was a survey for students with questions that were tailor-made for their use of language. They were in Spanish, of course, and an interview with the authorities. So with all that information, and also considering the levels of English that they were supposed to achieve, that information was condensed into a draft of the course syllabus, considering only the learning outcomes, the main learning outcomes, and the proposed activities to get to these learning outcomes. In the end, it was not possible to work with 4 programs, only with 2, with public relations and veterinary medicine. And I had weekly meetings with the teachers, with the professors in charge of those classes. So in these meetings I tried to explain the model, the constructive alignment model, what they were expected to do in the classrooms, considering the learning outcomes, so they were coherent. And I created with them the evaluation activities, which were basically trying to emulate the target language situations. To give some examples, in veterinary medicine, they, instead of studying the same with a course book of English and vocabulary and grammar, they were asked to read pieces of news, graded pieces of news, of course, and they had to detect certain language related to their programs in English. And then these readings become increasingly difficult, and they ended up with research articles in their program. So this was of course scaffolded into a more complex task, and by the end of the term they were able to identify specific information in the articles. Of course they had just 2 courses of English, so probably they couldn't speak as much, or probably they couldn't write as much, but the important thing was that they detected the relevant information in the research articles, which was basically what they had to learn English for in the first place. On the other hand, as a drastically opposed example, the students in public relations had to present, because the English that they studied was, the idea of the program was that they would be able to present different types of information related to public relations in English, and with a good pronunciation. Their emphasis was in pronunciation as a whole. So then in the second semester, what happened was that I collected the information on the results. These results were not focused on the marks or the grades they got, but rather on the use of language observed through field notes throughout the semester, and also a final interview with students and with the teachers, a focus group with the teachers. So with that information, I revised the plan from the first semester, and I decided to do the same in the second semester, hoping of course to be able to work with the 4 programs, which was impossible, because since the system at the university is so standardized, it is very difficult for students to be to enroll in the same class, or having in one class only students from one program. The only possibility for that was that I informally contacted students from public relations, and I told them that I was going to intervene in a particular section, in a particular class, and they all enrolled into that class. So that made it possible, actually, not really the systems or the authorities, but rather the students themselves, which was also a kind of a good feedback for the study. They wanted to keep participating in the same course. In the second semester, I only was able to work with public relations, They had increasingly difficult activities in which they had to present, they had to write certain summaries. Everything was connected to public relations, and as I said before, it was made in conjunction with the teachers in charge of the course. So they knew, for example, the language that they were supposed to be learning in the regular courses, and we used that language and the target language situation to create activities that were both meaningful for them in terms of the situations in which they had to use the language, but also they sort of covered the grammar and vocabulary that they were supposed to be studying. Because after the intervention they would have to go back to their regular courses, so it wouldn't be fair for them to not to learn those words and the grammar and vocabulary, because they would be it would be prejudicial for them. So after the second cycle, which was very effective, students were really motivated with the course. They felt really part of the course. They felt that it made sense for them, because they were basically developing their own identity in the program. They were looking at professionals in their area. So they felt really in touch with the presentations or the activities in general that they had to carry out in the classes. The final results of the study were basically centered around motivation and the not engagement, but basically the attention to specific linguistic activities. It is impossible in this worldview or the soul of the study to think about having the same activities for all students and to evaluate all students in the same way, considering that they're from different programs. So it was observed that students paid selective attention to certain activities in the classes when they felt they were more connected to their future professions, which was one of the expected outcomes of the study, and it was very positive. Students were really motivated and really concentrated in the activities. This was detected in the classes themselves, but in my case I observed that through field notes. I recorded that in field notes, and I didn't have any previous experience teaching these courses, but that was also collected in the focus group with the professors that participated in the project. So they said that it was a drastic change and it was a breath of fresh air, because basically they were used to having the same classes with the same textbook, with the same grammar and vocabulary, and then now that the courses were diversified, students were paying attention to certain things, and not only in terms of the marks that they would get in the course, but also it was a connection with the future professions, which is very it sort of corroborates the perspective of constructive alignment. Students will pay attention, unfortunately, maybe for us as educators, they will pay attention to certain aspects of the class when there is an evaluation that depends on those aspects. So, for example, they would pay attention to certain aspects in pronunciation only if they know that they're going to be evaluated, because basically nowadays at university, at least in Chile, I don't know if in Russia it's the same thing, since everyone can access university, and since the purpose of university is conceived like socially as something that leads into a degree or a certificate that allows people to work and to get a better salary. Some students, probably many students, at least in this reality, are focused on just passing the course, getting good marks, and getting the diplomas at the end, which is something that we struggle with as educators, because we would want them to reach deep learning, to really, I don't know, understand the purpose of education, to understand that university opens their minds, not only the doors to the employers, but in order to work with this mindset, we can either fight the students and constantly remind them of these purposes, but we can also, and probably more constructively, help them get there. So basically the idea is to align the different evaluation activities with the purposes of learning. Because basically if students are told constantly that they have to pay attention to pronunciation, to grammar, and certain aspects of English, if these aspects are not evaluated, then of course that's incoherent to the mind of the adult learner, and they don't pay attention to these aspects. So probably one of the most important conclusions in the study was the need to stop these programs being standardized. And I think that that's something that happens in any university, at least here in Chile, that when programs are standardized, students are not able to diversify and to find their own need for the use of English. We cannot expect that all students will have the perfect grammar, vocabulary and pronunciation when they're not, of course, language professionals. If students, for example, if a student from public relations doesn't want to pay much attention to written language, and he or she wants to emphasize the oral language pronunciation because that gives them the access to the discursive circles that they want to participate in, then that's of course really logical. So in conclusion, I can say that the project was really effective. Students were really motivated with the class, which was one of the purposes of the study. And it makes sense not only for students but also for professors doing the courses and for the authorities that control this. So in sum, it was detected a need to rethink the way in which students learn English at university, because a really logical English course would consider the students' needs and the purpose for learning and how this is connected to the professional future. Okay, I think that this is all I have to say about the study. I hope that that this presentation was not really confusing. I hope that I clarified what the study was about. And if you want to contact me, if you have questions about this particular study, feel free to write me. You have my contact details. So thank you very much.